Welcome to another segment of Gas-Powered Thoughts. I'm Kerry Shirley. Today I want to talk about some options available for the Whiplash Gas model. You might recognize this. It's the same prototype model that I used in the build documentation on the forum. What I want to show you today are some upgrades available both from miniature aircraft and from some other vendors. So let's start off with the landing gear. Some people have expressed that they don't really like the landing gear on the Whiplash model. It's a matter of taste. Some people like the way it looks, some people don't. Well, what Miniature has done is made available an option. So if you like the original tough strut look that Miniature Aircraft came up with, they've come up with an installation kit so you can actually use tough struts. Basically, you reuse the skids that come with the original kit, and you simply replace the struts with the tough strut 2s. They're a little bit shorter and are lower, and they're a little bit wider than the original, so it has more of the traditional XCell look. The other thing they've come up with an option is a pinion gear for the gas model. It's a 17-tooth pinion. It changes the gear ratio from 6-8-8 to 7-2-9. If you have any interest in running longer blades, like for the 800 conversion kit that's coming, or you want to turn the head slower for some reason, or you have a high performance motor like with a tune pipe that you need to turn the engine faster, this might be what you need to do that. You can do the calculations based on the head speeds you want to run and the engine RPMs that are your target and see if this might make sense for you. Something else they've come up with is a different clutch bell. It hasn't really changed shape in any way, and for the most part the design is the same, with the exception of at the top there's now a guide, a bronze guide that's been pressed in. And what this really does is it keeps the pinion gear perfectly aligned both at the top and the bottom. In the original design there's a bearing in the bottom, but the top didn't have one. So it was possible that this gear could move around slightly. With this spacer or guide in place, it really can't move at all. I believe the latest kits will have this included in it. If you have an older kit and you've had a problem with the sprag, you'll want to get this upgraded bell. That'll solve that. A couple of other things that have become available from Hattori. They've introduced a new version of the SAB-12. Here in the United States it's known as the SAB-12. Other parts of the world it's known as the Hattori 957. What's different about it is it uses the isolation mount system that's Hattori's famous for. You mount a plate to the cylinder, and then the muffler has a larger header that slides over some Viton O-rings, and then you tighten the muffler down. Has the same sound, same power characteristics, but it's much lighter. The original Hattori gas muffler weighed over 12 ounces. This one weighs just a little bit over 8 ounces. So this makes it the second lightest muffler on the market. Plus, you get typical Hattori performance and quality. One more thing I want to show you, something from B.H. Hansen. This is something that Al Cianelli and Adam Mancini have put together. It's a tune pipe, and it's a tune pipe that's made specifically for the Whiplash gas. The configuration of the header is such that it bolts right onto the model, and it's got a custom mounting system that bolts right onto the frame without any modifications. Tune pipe's designed to make more power. It also has a unique sound. It's a little bit raspier than probably what you're used to. It does have a silencer on it, still fairly loud. But the benefit is significant increase in power. Earlier I talked about changing the gear ratio on the model. If you intend to run something like a tune pipe, you probably want to make a change to the standard gear ratio so that you can spin the motor a little bit higher. So with that, let's take a little closer look at some of these things. So let's start out by mounting the Hattori muffler. This is the 957, the new version. Also in the United States it's known as the SAB12R2. Just like with the original muffler, the first thing you mount is the header to the cylinder. As you can see here, it's a little bit different than the original. Instead of being a large steel plate, it's a fairly lightweight aluminum plate that has O-rings on it, and mounts onto the cylinder just like it normally would. So at this point you're ready to mount the muffler, and as you can see I've already put the isolators in the header, and the header has a rather large cavity that fits over these O-rings, and this simply slips over. You want to lubricate them with some synthetic oil so they fit well. You push it on and you take the supplied 2.5 millimeter bolts, and then you're going to put them in to the 4 mount positions and tighten this down. Alright, here you can see I've got the muffler mounted into position with all of the isolator bolts mounted and tightened up. It looks for the most part like a standard Hattori muffler, but as I said earlier, this one's much lighter. Weighs almost 50% lighter than the original Hattori gas muffler. So you might want to check this out. Now I want to talk about another optional part. This is the tune pipe kit from B.H. Hansen. As I referenced earlier, it's something that Al Cianelli and Adam Mancini have put together, and it's specifically designed to run on the Whiplash. The pipe's been properly tuned to fit the gear ratios available, and the header's been custom made to fit the model correctly. There's also a mount that you can see at the bottom which bolts right onto the chassis. Doesn't require any modification, goes right on. Now I'll tell you now, the one thing that I'm not going to go into depth here is how to actually tune this. What you can see from this is the header and the pipe are actually put together with a piece of flexible tubing, and that tubing actually threads into both the header as well as the pipe, and the length of that is completely variable. You have to cut it to the proper length. To get that length, you're going to need some help from your motor manufacturer, because it'll depend on how your motor is ported as to how and what RPM you're going to run as to exactly what that length will be. So for purposes of this introduction, we're going to stay away from that subject, but I do want to show you how this mounts to the model. So we're going to start off here by mounting the pipe mount, and we're looking at the rear of the chassis. This is on the right hand frame. These are the holes that you use to tighten up the tail rotor servo and mount the tail rotor bell crank, and can make adjustments to it. The way the mount plate works is it uses these holes, comes with the bolts you need. It slides right through, comes with the lock nuts. You bolt this on, tighten it down. As you can see, this is slotted, so the pipe can actually move back and forth depending on the length of the flexible tuning component that you've inserted. So now that this mount is in place on the chassis, we're going to install the pipe. And as I said earlier, the header and the pipe actually thread together over this coupler. I've already gotten everything into position, so I know where these pipe mounts need to go. Basically, these are 2 steel rings that have heat resistant silicone over them, and they connect together with a bolt and these rubber dampers. And these rubber dampers actually go through the slots on this mount here. And again, depending on exactly how long this piece is, the exact position in that slot will change a little bit. But what you do is mount the header into place on the cylinder, and then these 2 bolts go into the mount like that. Then there's a piece of aluminum that connects the 2 isolator bolts on the bottom and then lock nuts that hold the whole assembly together, as well as the standard bolts that go into the cylinder. Okay, here you can see the pipe installed. You can see underneath how the dampers install. Once this is all in place, it's really quite secure, and yet it's able to move with vibration. So it's really quite a nice setup. One thing you will have to deal with, and there's really no way around this, is you'll have to make a slight trim to the canopy. Otherwise, the header actually will rub on the outside of the canopy, and since it's hot, it'll damage it. It's not a particularly large cut, but one that you do have to make in order for this to work. Once it's installed, though, it actually looks pretty good on the model. Okay, let's talk about the optional landing gear. Here's one of the struts. It's a Tough Strut 2. Comes with a little graphite plate. The struts have been center drilled to fit the holes on this frame spacer. Frame spacer has been modified so it accepts 4mm bolts. So basically what this does is replace the front and rear struts on the Whiplash. So you want to unbolt these and remove the spacer you see in the center there, and we're going to replace it with these parts. The actual skids, the aluminum parts, are going to be reused. It's the struts we're replacing. Okay, here you can see I've got the old struts and skids removed from the chassis. Basically it's just removing 4 bolts, and then the 2 sides pop off and you take the spacers out of the center. Now we're going to replace these with the new parts. So the way I'm going to do this is I've gone ahead and pre-assembled the strut, the carbon spacer or the graphite spacer, and the aluminum frame spacer all together. These holes are really tight, so you can do that without a problem. And then you simply insert it right into the frame where the old one went, and you use the supplied shorter 4mm bolts, and you bolt it into place. You're going to repeat that with both the front and the back. So that's really it. As you can see, the struts just bolt right on. 4 bolts, you tighten them up. It's pretty much in place. The only thing we need to do now is transfer the skids from the original model and use the set screws which come with the kit to tighten it in. So here you can see I've transferred the skids over. Everything's assembled and in place. This is a very simple conversion to do. These are, the original Tough Strut 2s. So if you make a lot of hard landings, these things are very durable. You won't have any issue with breaking or bending bolts or having the individual landing gear snap off, which can happen. These are very durable and very tough, hence Tough Struts. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at here are the clutch bell, is the clutch bell upgrade. Here's the original bell. As you can see, there is no guide or seal on the top of the sprag bearing. There's a bearing down inside, but there's nothing to keep the pinion gear from moving around. Now, you wouldn't think that it could really move that much, but the fact is, under loads, it can actually move a little bit in the bearing. And I know what the nitro guys have found is the sprag bearing has sometimes had a problem. Now, I don't really know anybody with the gas model that's had a problem, but nonetheless, what Miniature has done is produced a new version that has a bronze guide in it. If you're familiar with the old constant drive that or auto clutch that Miniature used to make, they had a very similar setup with a bronze guide. So what this does is once the pinion goes in here, it's not moving. There's no way this can move. So this is definitely an improvement. I think the current models being shipped include this. It is available if you'd like to replace the one you have. If you're not having trouble with it, then it's not worth your time. Okay, as you see, I got the model back together. It's got the new landing gear on it. It's a little bit lower, a little bit wider. It's also a little bit lighter, about a ½ ounce. We've got the 7:9 gear ratio. That's the 17-tooth pinion installed. We're going to do some testing with the tune pipe system I showed you earlier from B.H. Hansen. So I want to be able to spin the motor a little bit faster. We've also got the new clutch bell installed with the Pinion guide in it. These are all the latest updates for the Whiplash Gas. If you want more information about them, visit miniatureaircraftusa.com. You can find all the part numbers on their catalog. Get them for your Whiplash.